Well, yeah, no worries. Sounds good. Ready to
Hey
go.
Gollings, welcome other side of the world over in Australia. Strange place to be at the moment. Thank you for joining us. How are things?
Tom, thank you. Yeah, very well. I think we've been very fortunate over here with current global climate. There's probably worse places, I'd say, to be stuck if that if that made sense. But yeah, look, I'm very well at the moment. So yeah, not too bad.
Family well, kids good, everything's, you must be sort of coming back to life slowly in Australia.
Yeah, look, things have been fairly normal for us. We've never had one kind of complete lockdown requirement as such as just being smart, I guess, around these times. But the family well. I think kids have enjoyed a little bit of a longer holiday and time at home. So no, I think under the circumstances we've done well. And I think time it's probably the longest time I've spent out of rugby, which has been different, but at the same time quite refreshing. So although I'm looking forward to getting back into it.
Let's dive into that. Well, this series has very much been about getting to know some of the people that have made an impact on the Dubai Rugby Sevens over the years, especially those that have been involved in it at multi-levels. When was the first time that you came out to the Dubai Rugby Sevens, and what did it look like?
First time I think was 2002. So it would have been at the older ground, Dubai. I mean, it wasn't. I guess it wasn't just the ground. It was Dubai itself. Was a handful of high rises, and certainly not what we see today. But it was, it was still a spectacular event back then at the old ground, and my very first experience really of coming to this kind of part of the world, the United Arab Emirates. So it was enjoyable on many different fronts actually, and the tournament was a lot of fun.
2002 is only 3 years after the World Series had started, so the sport was really young. What was it that got you into rugby sevens? How did your pathway to rugby sevens start?
Yeah, I mean, if I look back when we were at school, the school I went to, we weren't a big rugby school, but we played in the Rosslyn Park School boys tournament. We were fortunate enough to win it the very first year we went into it. Just one of those things where the planets aligned really, and that kind of springboarded my rugby career, as it were. And I think it always gave me a passion for running around in the shorter game. I've loved and played both, and I like them as much as each other. But sevens was a position to be able to express yourself. Not being a big guy, you take the size dominance out a little bit. But I think it was refreshing, the balance between the two, and the ability to have, visited certain places you'd never think of or dream of, like. All added to the kind of flavour that sevens creates, and I guess the pull for myself.
Back to 2002 and when you were on the series at the very beginning, so the early years of playing for England, how different was the series then to how perhaps it looks in the Olympic era now?
I mean, it's interesting. Obviously, I think there's obviously a lot more focus on the sevens. So the actual event, the global event itself, has grown dramatically, and the game has obviously moved on. There's probably a lot more, focus on the kind of specifics of the training and the way the game is played. I'd like to say more professional, but I think it's professional in a different sense. Obviously, every year you learn and grow from the year past. But I think, when we were playing in 2002, it wasn't to say we weren't. I think expectation wasn't as high because we were really kind of finding our feet in what was the World Series back then. But if I look at the caliber of player we had playing, I mean, most of us were Premiership level rugby players and/or having already played for England 15. So the level of rugby on the field was still competitive. Probably slightly different in terms of size of player and stature as they are now. They're very much developed for that specific game. But I think the beauty of it was we were involved in a time in the game that sprungboarded it into what we see and opportunities it's had with the Olympics, and to have been a part of that as a player, I look back on and think I've been very privileged.
How does those England sides that you were involved with that got so many great names in it that was in those early years, the side that was so successful in Hong Kong under Mike Friday, and how do you think that side would do against a fully professional side now? Because the caliber of player is very, very different, but as you say, the game is different. So are you saying if you give those boys a bit more time, then it's no contest, or is there a contest somewhere?
Look, it's hard to say, like to compare apples with apples. It's I think the players that were playing, I believe they probably could withstand it nowadays. Obviously they probably need a bit more of the training, but skillful wise, I think just as skillful. I just think obviously as the game's grown, there's been a lot more tactical focus, and the specifics around the ruck and the laws around the breakdown have changed in the way that it's performed. And probably, I dare say the speed of the game, but I think that's a lot of sports. As we move through, people get fitter and fitter and quicker, so that makes sense as well. But I don't think they'd fare too badly. I think from an understanding of the game and the kind of what I call the top 2 inches, the brain side of it, I think they'd fare pretty well. I mean, I think one of the advantages I felt was actually 15s and the balance between the two back then robust. And therefore we were playing rugby week in, week out. And I think that's one of the recipes of sevens is you need to be robust to get yourself through 2 weeks of sevens, 2 weekends in a row. But, these guys, they perform now at a level that's it is different. And the physicality is a lot different. And I dare say, they probably enjoy the breaks, whereas we used to love just playing, I guess.
Hey, what about when you think back to those sides? Who are the players that stood out that were in those early England teams that you think would do really well today and would be natural sevens talent?
I mean, Simon Amor, for instance, obviously the England coach at the time now. He was someone that really suited sevens. He was a good thinker. Again, size, he wasn't a big guy, but that didn't matter. He was a good leader. Back then, incredibly fit and quick. He had the qualities needed for a good player. And the likes of, Henry Paul was great as somebody who you could use as a balance, and someone who just, you want those kind of X factors, people that do something. We look at other players like, the original wingers of Richard Haughton, who's now refereeing on the circuit. I mean, back then he had pace that not many people had, and then you had Tom Varndell in there and Hugo Monnier, and to name a few of the England wingers that went through. There were a number of real class acts that gave us real weapons, and I think what stood us well back in those days was we had a core group of players, like for instance myself, Simon, Richard Haughton, Rob Tilby, and a few others, and days that they're able to be the kind of core side, and we were able to bring other players in and help them adapt quickly to the difference between 15s and sevens. And it was about just allowing them to express themselves. So there was the players we had playing were great rugby players.
Is there
and that's to say played against as well. I mean, the competition at that level was pretty interesting.
Is there Henry Paul's legendary on and off the field, right? I'd imagine that probably the approach to the off the field part of the game was slightly different in the middle of the noughties, as it were, than it compared to 15 years later. Is that fair?
Yeah, look, I think so. And there's nothing really to hide other than that. We used to work really hard in the week leading up to the tournament, and then we'd put our bodies on the line at the weekend. And the nice thing about this was you'd done the kind of business end. There was a players function put on, which allowed you to mix and mingle with the opposition and get to know other teams. And then actually just kind of let your hair down for 5 minutes, because you'd kind of been coming up and up and on and on and on and on. It was nice but I think the beauty of the sevens as well is it it was done. There's never been any kind of instance that's really put the game in, I would say, a bad position. And again, it was all part and parcel, I think, of learning all the different areas and places you'd go and play in, and Dubai, you from a nightlife perspective as you would from out in the desert playing rugby, and seeing supporters as you do in the likes of Hong Kong. So, I thought the balance was quite good, and it certainly didn't detract from the way we played the game.
Do you think, as the sport has grown, do you think that there are challenges that the sport is currently facing as a sport? Do you think that some of the way that the model used to work is strong, or do you think we're in the Olympic era? You understand why the game is taken so seriously, a fitness element and so on like that, or is a bit of a mixture of the two the way you'd like to see it?
It has, and I guess if you look at it from that social side, just firstly, players are under the microscope nowadays with social media and the amount of attention on them that, it does make it a lot more difficult for them to be seen out and it to seem normal. I mean, in fairness, we're all human in a while, as long as you don't, you reap what you sow. If you take it too far, then adequately people can have a go at you. But I think there's got to be a balance, and you need that kind of off switch from time to time. But I think the game has got to a level where it's got to, and rightly so, because of its Olympic, right? And there's a big headache on all of the World Rugby itself and tournament organisers like yourself as to how you try and fit as much rugby into one weekend, because obviously the female game has grown exponentially year on year on, and to add that in and make it make sense. And I think as long as we don't detract the game, then you've always got to allow for the adaptation and the growth. And I think in sevens that's always been the case. The team that adapts the fastest on the field is the team that's successful, and I think we've got to do the same thing as rugby keeps growing.
You've been part of some great memories on the series, and quite rightly so, considered a legend of our sport with the amount of points that you scored. I think that there are some envious players out there for that. But you've also lived the other side of the Dubai Sevens and being, been involved in the Vets tournament the last couple of years. Tell us about how that is and what you've been representing and your involvement there in the Vets team that played this year.
Yeah, it's one of the unique sides of the Dubai Sevens, really, isn't it? People can focus on the World Series, but if you're actually in Dubai and at the event, there's a lot more to it than just the World Series teams playing. I mean, it's a number of 700 teams running around in multiple different sports. And I think for me, as a player that used to come and play and see it from the one side, it's lovely to see it from that side, which is the spectator side, which is fantastic, and it's a great event in that regard. But also then to still, I guess it's an opportunity for us older players to meet up and have a good yarn and talk about the old days, and then actually put it to good use by supporting charities. And the team that I've been playing for is the 100 World Legends, and specifically, it's not one specific charity. It supports. This year in Dubai, it was around supporting Chester Williams because it was unfortunate, obviously, with his passing, and then disadvantaged kids in other areas. So, it's great for us to be able to come and do it and play for a different reason. Product of that, there's more to it, and it's a fantastic to still be able to be involved in the event, both as a spectator and still in rugby. And I dare say my playing days are still probably coming to a bit of an end, as I tore my bicep last time running around. Body doesn't do quite. You've got to keep coming back to Dubai and being involved in any way I can, because I do love it, and I love being involved in that environment.
Ben, you're in Australia now, and English fans will be very will remember you in a white jersey. But you've been around the world a lot as a coach since retiring from the game as well, and in the USA, Sri Lanka, in China. What are the things that you've seen in those smaller nations in the game of sevens, and how have you ended up involved in the Tatooine of rugby, should we call it?
I think I always had a passion passion thing post playing. And I think one of the beauties of the game, and I learned that when I was playing, was the places you could go and travel and where it could take you. And I guess it also probably became a little bit of a bug, itchy feet if I'm in one place for too long. But my first year, I would never have known the rugby history in a country like that, and to have been a part of it and to help their growth and kind of start things afresh for them was a great experience. And they're people that just gave back, which is what I quite enjoy about a lot of the places I've been. They really give back. They want to absorb they want to learn, because they're not as higher up the tree as other teams would have been, rightly so. They're only just starting out in rugby. But China for me was culturally was a bit of a baptism of fire, really. And I would never have known it unless I'd gone there and experienced it. If they take rugby seriously, which they are doing, they're going to grow and grow and grow. And sevens is the format that's going to grow in. And obviously the women would be competing on the Olympics when we see it happen. And for me, it's nice to be able to put back into the game in that regard. I still have a goal of obviously wanting to coach series. I've learned a lot every time I've gone and coached somewhere else and been on that kind of journey. And I hope one day that I see my goal out, but I certainly won't look back and be disappointed with what I've done so far.
When you say baptism of fire culturally, I'm interested to, I obviously spent some time coaching out in Sri Lanka as well, so I appreciate that was different, but I imagine China was really, really different.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I played in Japan, so I learned a very, I guess, rich Asian culture in that regard. But so different when I got to China and learning how they were. It was quite incredible, really. And I think sometimes you go to places and not be too immersed. I was fully immersed. We live, eat, slept, breathe together as a team in an Olympic training facility. Literally, the players, unless when I got there, we made sure there was breaks, they would never go home. So it was just normality. And it was very different seeing how they worked, and understanding them. And they looked after me fantastically. I dare say some of the things I ate whilst I was there, I probably wouldn't try again. But so far, that you just have to adapt with that. And the players themselves, barrier in itself was quite interesting, and working with a full-time translator. But it was fun. It was a fantastic experience, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. And even right up, I was dealing with the Olympic Association in China, which is a powerhouse. Seeing how all of that works is invaluable from an experience perspective.
You spent some time in the USA with Serevi and working out there. Is it the sleeping giant that everybody likes to think it is? Is the big future in front for the USA sevens and rugby in general?
I think so. I mean, obviously, COVID everywhere is going to put a bit of a dent in it, so I don't want to focus too much on that. But I think they'll get through that. And it has, from when I was there to seeing where it is now, the MLR is really growing from strength to strength. And it's great to see that they finally got a competition that's got some solid roots and has that platform to grow. And that will be a springboard. And, if we do see, which they're very capable of, the USA, both men's and women's teams medaling in an Olympics, all of a sudden it gets a certain level of attention in the US that they're not used to seeing, and a lot of heads. And there is an abundance of athlete out there that for whatever reason they don't quite make the top echelons in NFL or NBA and the big sports like that. Rugby's got an opportunity to maximize these athletes, and once got further than what I'd call a rugby age, which is just training in the sport, they are going to become a force to be reckoned with, and it will become a strong game there. And they have the whereabouts of knowing how to really professionalize and commercialize sport. So I think it's a case of watch this space.
And your old roommate, Matt Turner, seems to be doing well. He always lands on his feet somewhere, doesn't he?
Ruby, yes, he does. He wangles his way in there. I see he's now the assistant coach of Seattle.
Yeah.
But I think, it's great for USA Rugby to have the likes of a Matt over there that's, investing his time back into that's needs really. You know, that they learn quickly from people that have the experience, and then they grow their own talent.
And looking forwards now back to the World Series and where we are, and you know, a very exciting time for the sport. Who are the players that you see on the series now that really excite you? You think, I wouldn't want to defend against him in the middle of the field, or I wouldn't want to be in a ruck with that guy. Like, who are the people that really impress you here?
Oh, good question. Actually, name me a few. I mean, any Fijian currently.
Literally any Fijian.
Literally, I think any Fijian's always a battle. I think, you know, but there's been a few players that are coming through now. I forget the name of the halfback, actually. The name eludes me, but he's certainly growing into a strong player. You know, South Africa, they've obviously just lost Cecil Africa, but they seem to create an abundance of players. Standouts, really, you'll have to excuse me, I've lost with names, but I mean, I think what we're seeing differently, though, is there's, you know, so many teams are becoming so competitive. I mean, you look at Kenya, they went through a bit of a rebuild phase, but they're now producing again. And the likes of Samoa, I forget his name. He's got the long piece of hair at the back. He's quite. I like seeing the kind of the guys that mix things up, aren't afraid to try something different and play off the game plan a little bit.
And who were the players like
with England? You know, in our day.
Yeah, who were the players in the early part of the series that were those players that were those creatives? Who were the ones that was it?
Uali Mai, Serevi, Amasio Valence, Ironi IE. Who else would it be? I mean, Henry Paul would have been another. I'm trying to think who for.
And that New Zealand squad, we had
names. They did have a few players.
We had DJ Forbes with us a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about, and Carlton Arla the week before that. And we were talking about those early New Zealand sides, and you know, just some of the talent that's come through that New Zealand program under Titchins over the years. Just incredible.
Their 2002, their 2002 Commonwealth Games squad was ridiculous, to say the least. And you know, I grew up watching a number of these players. I mean, take for instance Eric Rush. It was quite nice to be able to have a good team, the likes for a while. And they had people like Craig de Goldie, Joe Rocococo, who else? You name it, they were in the side. I was going to say Dalasau. He was a Fijian. He was pretty useful himself as well. Like if you look at both the New Zealand team, right the way up to 2005, so there was some serious names in those teams. And it's not to say they haven't produced a similar talent now. They're just more sevens focused players than they were back then, which were the 15 sevens converts. But you know, I mean, yeah, if you look at those amount of players that went on to actually All Black, it was pretty formidable.
And I suppose it shows where the sport is, because in that 2002 side, if I'm right, you had Josh Lucy playing in Manchester, and a year later he wins the World Cup, right?
Yeah, Josh Lucy, Jamie Noon, Pat Sanderson, Phil Greening, Henry. Yeah. There was a number of players in the England squad ourselves that we went on to be capped and did a lot for England in the future. I mean, it was, for us, it was still a big learning curve. I think we were so new to sevens, and we just came out of Fiji in the in our quarter final. I think we gave them a jolly good run, that's for sure. One would like to say it probably wasn't for the fact that Rob Thilby had got knocked out and didn't know where he was on the field. we might have fared better. Not that we can blame him. He got hit by Bill Satala, who's somebody who so. And then we had a very interesting game against Australia when he missed the kick in front of the post. So I mean, the teams were, you know, arguably back then, New Zealand and Fiji were really slightly more out in front in the sevens world than we were.
And now you mentioned that
We
you've
caught
got a
back up
goal.
in the later years.
You've got a goal of coming back and coaching on the series, or coming to coach on the series long term. How do, what's next for Ben Gollings as you move forwards? Obviously, moving past COVID, how are you involved in the game now, and how are you involved in the game of sevens and that big goal coming back to the series?
Yeah, I've always been pretty close to the game. I was just in this season now, and leading into the Olympics, I was working with Henry Paulus, an assistant there with the Canadian Sevens, who he's in charge with. It was a great opportunity for me to get back in that arena. But for me, it's I guess I'm, you know although I was seen as a legend of the game and a great player, it doesn't always mean to default makes you a great coach, right? So I've gone about really trying to learn the game and the nuances from a coaching perspective, and we discussed earlier where that's taken me. And I feel now's a time where I'm ready to really take that opportunity. I've missed out over the years on a couple of opportunities, but the people who've got the jobs have been very good coaches. This sevens really, from a coaching perspective, there wasn't a huge emphasis on it when I was running around as such. But as soon as things got serious and Olympics got involved, coaches have really seen an opportunity, and so it's become a lot more competitive from that angle. But I've actually enjoyed the break. I think that's been healthy for me, and I'm hungry to get back involved. A lot of work, and the work I was doing with the rugby did mean I had to travel, and that's been halted currently. So, but I'm still doing a number of things with calls from afar. I've been doing a lot of coach development within the say lesser countries that I've created relationships, which is great. Because coaching from that level is really important. That's going to help the game grow. But to be back involved in a full team capacity post COVID would be exciting for me, and I'm just working on a few opportunities there, as well as actually balancing the work rugby lifestyle with something outside of rugby, because it keeps you happy and it teaches you skills that I wouldn't necessarily have had if I was still in the rugby environment. So I'm enjoying that side of things as well.
And that old teammate of yours that you mentioned, Simon Amor, as whether he stays involved in the sevens for the Olympics is to be seen, but he's heading off to Eddie Jones's backroom staff. Do you think sevens has a role to develop young coaches as well, and moving on into the 15s game in the same way that it is for players?
Yeah, definitely. I think coaching in as a whole is, if you take this tactical awareness and the specifics of the game out of play, a lot of coaching is about how you manage players, how you get the best out of your players, and work with people and lead. And I think those qualities and strengths can be used in any part of the coaching, whether it's rugby or another sport. You can use them as adaptive skills. In sevens, as a player, it's a cauldron to play in. As a coach, there's a similar amount of pressure on you to do well. And teams want to be vying in that top four come Olympic year, which is important. They want to stay on the World Series if you're slightly further down in the rankings. So I think there's a lot that you can take out of sevens that springs boards, careers in 15s, and vice versa. And if I, for one, I know I would knock back the opportunity, and I have been looking at the 15s world as well, because I believe, if you've got those values and qualities, you can add in both areas.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, I know that the series would certainly love to see a Ben Gollings back on the sidelines, and we'd probably give you back from our vets tournaments, but only for a couple of years, because it's important that we see you playing. Especially with the likes of Max Evans walking around in a dressing gown, which I spotted the two of you. So that's part of it.
He's another level, that guy. Good though. Good. It's all about that's what sevens is, right? About getting in the spirit from the sideline. Otherwise, you actually stand out even more.
Yeah, 100%. And then you got another old friend of yours, Andy Vilk, in that squad as well, who probably was drinking lemonades and taking it just as seriously as he used to.
Yeah, and he's always had a serious touch to him. But actually, I'd have to say he's mellowed a little bit. I think he hadn't had some of those opportunities, and so I think he thrived in it. I think it is great to be able to just catch up with old players, and there's 4 or 5 teams stacked full of ex-pro players, internationals, and guys who played in the Premiership and elsewhere. And so it is fun to be able to get together and keep that kind of team bonding and mateship. It's an important part of, I think, having been through the rugby process. So, long may those teams now. The only thing with the vets comp, it's almost getting too serious. They need to up the age a little bit to probably over 40s.
Ben, I know that you are very much a legend of the Dubai Sevens. You've played in World Cups and been here in our vets, and we want to welcome you back, for many, many years, and hope that you'll come back and work in some of our development programs and do some of the kids stuff as well. So thank you ever so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it, and we look forward to welcoming you back to the desert soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity to jump online, and look forward to being back when we can.
Absolutely. Thanks ever so much, Ben. Appreciate your time. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.